going to keep my introduction brief because the congressman told me to. But Congressman Representative Emmanuel Cleaver has been a leader in Congress since he first arrived in 2005, representing the 5th Congressional District of Missouri, which incorporates Kansas City. In Congress, Mr. Cleaver has been a vocal champion for those whom politicians often do not hear, whether those who are unemployed, who are facing hunger, poverty, and other crises. Congressman Cleaver has been a spokesperson for those individuals. Even when he was the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Cleaver did not hesitate to bring truth to power and to fight for what was right, even if that meant disagreeing with then President Barack Obama at the time. Often people say this ability to bring truth to power was attributed to the fact that Congressman Cleaver also is a United Methodist pastor. And his training is what drives Congressman Cleaver to work with all of his colleagues, regardless of their political power. Congressman Cleaver is a true warrior for change, and I want you all to join me in welcoming Congressman Cleaver to speak with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here, and I apologize that I will only be able to speak for an hour because anyway, it is good to be with you, and I do understand. You are at the end of the day, and no matter how, you try to facially say you are welcoming me, I've been around enough to know that, even the Christian community can fake it, and you want to go home or you want to go eat. And I was taught a horrible, but maybe profound lesson. My grandmother invited me to speak at the annual homecoming church service at the Mount Lebanon Primitive Baptist Church in Waxahachie, Texas. Still stands, and my grandmother had been a member there for 90-something years. And so she invited me to come down, and so I paid my own way and went over to the church, and it was packed. So it probably would only seat maybe 100, 125. Then they had a lot of people outside and had the windows up. It was in the spring of the year, so it was nice outside. And I came, to the podium when I was introduced, and I hadn't prepared any remarks. I had prepared no sermon. I mean, after all, I was a seminary graduate. I could quote Barth and Tillich and Kierkegaard and Bonhoeffer. So, what did I need to do a sermon for? Not only that, I had been on Meet the Press. I'd been on Oprah. Why would I need to come to Waxahachie and write a sermon? So I stood up, nothing. I just stood up and said, it's good to be here. Good to be here with my grandma. And, it was a good chance for me to spend some time with her and visit the church where I was baptized. And so I said, I'd like to be of any value to you that I can. What would you like for me to preach about this afternoon? And so my first grade Sunday school teacher was in the back. She stood up, Miss Allen, and she had a little white, some of the African-American clergy who can understand the white handkerchief with lace. And she was in the back, and she was waving her handkerchief with the lace. And so I said, Miss Allen, good to see you. God bless you. I said, what would you like for me to preach about? And she said, Cleaver, I'd like for you to preach about 5 minutes. So that was my life lesson in the ministry, so I understand. And I would like to share with you maybe a little more than 5 minutes, but not many more. And so I am here primarily because of the Ecumenical Advocacy Day that you brought people together to deal with, and I'd like to share some of my thoughts with you on what I consider to be one of the most significant matters that is before our country right now. Because of the way Congress operates now, I fly an average of about 1,800 air miles a week. Sometimes I can go far more than that this week, for example, because I'll go home and then go fly someplace else to speak or something and then come back home. So it's at least 1,800 miles per week. And it is not a romantic or exciting thing to fly. Maybe it used to be, but it's not anymore. And I have hundreds of thousands of frequent flyer miles. I don't even use them, so they pile up. And because of the frequent flyer miles, when I walked into the airport to fly up here, one of the attendants called me up and said, "We're going to upgrade you to first class." And sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I won't. But because of my mileage, I always get on the airplane. I'm one of the first to get on the airplane. And so it's good and bad. The good part is I'm first to get on the airplane. The second part is the tragedy, because I sit there struggling, almost prayerful about what could happen next. I mean, I'm wondering, are they going to put the sneezer right by me? I mean, I've caught colds from him many times over the years. And so then the next one is, Lord, don't let that woman with that screaming baby sit next to me. Or the otherwise nice person who wants to talk from wheels up to wheels down. And I'm interested in knowing about her husband's cousin's barber. But it's just, I mean, not for the whole flight. And so I'm wondering about that. And eventually, I think I come to the realization where I think most of us should come, those of us from the faith community. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. So I come to the spot where I start thinking, hey, somebody's going to sit next to me, and my life, frankly, could be enriched by someone coming in that I have had no contact with. And then so I try to move my thinking. Jesus required uncommon kindness. Uncommon. I mean, anybody can be commonly kind, because that's usually a facade. But Jesus required uncommon kindness for 3 groups: the strangers, the orphans, and the widows. And welcoming strangers is not just a political policy, it is a theologically sound position for those of the faith community. And it takes a nation of great strength to become welcoming. However, we of this great nation cannot solve the legislative immigration reform too soon. You truly never know when soon will be too late. It is only sheer arrogance that Americans would say, even after reading Gibbon's both volumes of The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, well, that could never happen to us. The Romans said the same thing. The Babylonians said the same thing. The Brits said the same thing. The Napoleonic Empire said the same thing. Everyone says the same thing. And we are not immune to the punishment of God.
Say that.
The United States will continue to rise only by welcoming others to its shores. And as a nation of immigrants, that's our responsibility. For decades, the United States has been the top destination for migrants around the world. And in 2016, nearly 44 million immigrants called our nation a home. So at what point did we redefine the word immigration from an identity on which our great nation was faithfully and factually founded to a point where we believe that we must view immigration as an intrusion that our nation must rise up against? There are many who define immigration as caustic instead of candescent. They're wrong. Instead of eroding away our federal benefits, as many would like to believe, immigration is a fact, a light that fuels our economy. When I was redistricted in Missouri, my first district, I represented the largest city in our state, Kansas City. And then in an attempt to help me lose the next election, I was redistricted outside of Kansas City into rural Missouri, where it was anticipated that I would go down in flames. I had to get people to understand two things. One, that the urban core and the rural areas are actually connected. They're symbiotic. There's a symbiotic relationship. And now you can hear my farm people saying that, at least the leadership. I mean, you grow corn, you're just going to sell it to other farmers? No, you're going to sell it so that it comes into the world market and the urban country. So 50 years ago, the Farm Bill was connected to SNAP, or food stamps as they were known then. And so a few years ago, when one of the parties tried to disrupt that, the farmers came from all over the country to say, you don't pass food stamps with this, we're going to oppose it. And it was one of the highlights of my political career to experience that firsthand. But the other part of it is, in my district, there are huge apple farms, apple orchards. If we don't have immigrants, the apples die on the trees. And so it is ignorant for us to talk about immigrants in some kind of negative and nasty tone. Instead of eroding away our federal benefits, immigration actually fuels our economy. In fact, Mexican immigrants account for about 4% of the United States' total GDP. And that's just amazing. That's not what you're going to hear the people talking about when they talk about building a wall. There's a video I hope you'll look at, not while I'm speaking, but when you get back to your rooms, Google in "woman climbs wall in 24 seconds." I'm serious. And you'll see the clock, and you'll see this woman standing in front of the wall, and she goes up in 24 seconds. The world has never liked walls. Robert Frost, in his poem Mending Walls, points it out. Walls have never stopped anything. Ask the Chinese. Invaded 18 times. The walls didn't stop them. Ask the Russians. They put up a wall in Berlin. Walls don't stop anything. Somebody said good fences make good neighbors. They don't. They make hating neighbors. I mean, we're saying, something is contaminated by these people, so let's not let them in to the purity of our nation where there's no crime, no hostility. Now, I could continue this entire speech merely spouting out facts about the benefits of immigration. But the fact of the matter is that we came here today, all of you, you're here, as people of faith. And as people of faith, we need to focus on the effects of migrants on our system and our souls. When we are putting anybody down, we're damaging the soul of our country. I mean, who are we? Who are we to declare on God's geography who can come in and who can come out, who should stay out? The earth, I read somewhere, is the Lord's. That's what I read. And whoever wrote it went on to say, and everything that's in it. My mother used to say, son, be somebody who makes everybody feel like somebody. And today it saddens me to say that it is virtually impossible in our system to make immigrants feel as if they're somebody. I look at this DACA thing, a totally manufactured crisis. Manufactured. I mean, the president had, all he did is just set an artificial date and said it's over until unless they come up with something by this date. And it then put all of these immigrants, about 800,000 of them, wondering whether or not somebody's going to knock on their door and pull them away. I'm going to say something about that again. And then people do it under the banner of patriotism. Patriotism is a lot more than having a flag flying in your front yard or putting some kind of symbol up when you put your hand over your heart when the flag passes by, or standing up at a football game and taking off your cap. A lot of people believe that that is the depth of patriotism, and that you know that when you do this, you are a patriot. And so, if they can hate one group, it doesn't really disturb their patriotism because they stood up at the playing of the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. So that does it. A 30% hater cannot be a 100% American. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, the life pursuit of happiness. Look, if you're not there, you're not a full patriot. The nation was founded on that principle. And here we are right now having people who walk around because they have a lapel pin that has an American flag on it, that they are now Jesus Jr. because of the flag that they represent now. Everything that's good and theologically sound. And so I am troubled by what we are seeing. On January 24th, 2018, Syed Jamal was preparing to take his daughter to school. Instead, the 55-year-old chemist professor, not rapist, the 55-year-old chemist professor with a PhD was handcuffed and detained in front of his children. When his little boy tried to run over to hug his dad, the ICE agent said, "You touch him, and I'm going to arrest you and put handcuffs on you." Now, I know the little boy. I just had breakfast with the whole family. He was ordered to leave the country initially because of overstaying his visa. I don't have time to go into all the details, but his family had applied for a visa for him, and the process is going on for the 7th year. But I'm not going to hang out there. Therefore, Mr. Jamal, because of what he was doing, not a criminal and so forth, he was not considered a high priority for deportation. Instead of looking at Mr. Jamal as an individual who overstayed his visa twice, he was treated as a father of three in the United States, a beloved chemistry professor, as a hoodlum. He was not treated as somebody. He was treated as a nobody, as a thing. Now, however, that day, he was arrested without warning in front of his children and immediately put into deportation proceedings without a chance to say goodbye even to his wife. He was not treated like somebody. He was treated like a nobody. And fortunately, a myriad of individuals within his community, as well as several United States members of Congress, reached out in support of Dr. Jamal, requesting that he be given a stay of deportation. And in March of 2018, Dr. Jamal was finally allowed to return home and reunite with his family. I visited him down in a little deportation center right out 100 miles outside of El Paso. It is out there in the dark. It's not a town. The only thing there is a motel called the International Motel that nobody in here would want to sleep in. And it's 100 miles from El Paso, almost in the desert in Texas. And why was it put there? So that people wouldn't come, so that people wouldn't visit, so they'd be isolated. I'm not talking about what's going on in Russia. I'm talking about the United States of America. How dare we come to the conclusion that we can treat people like this without having to answer to God? Now, no words can even begin to describe the dehumanizing feeling of being treated like an object instead of a somebody. I know experientially. I was raised in the ironclad segregated moment in Texas that my entire family experienced. So instead of numbers, let's focus on the narrative. In the United States, there are thousands and thousands of Dr. Jamals who are confronted each day by the thought that an ICE agent can collect them and rush them off without even telling their family where they were. That's what happens in Russia. People just come up missing. On May 9th, 2017, one of our families and our eldest son was arrested and detained. And after 3 days, their son was released due to an application for DACA. Unfortunately, the mother was deported on June 7th, 2017, and banned from the United States for 10 years. Look, it is of utmost importance that we, as a community of theological understanding, come together to utilize our voices to mobilize the teachings of Jesus, and of course, my mother. A truck driver pulled off the highway and went into a roadside diner. And he sat down and ordered lunch. He ordered a hamburger. He ordered a cup of coffee and apple pie. And as he sat down, waiting, looking around, 3 men walked in. These were rough-looking characters in leather jackets and motorcycle helmets. And they had boots, which gave another indication as to who they were. And so they sat down at the counter alongside this truck driver, and one of them picked up his hamburger and began eating it. The other picked up his coffee and gulped it down. The other grabbed his pie and ate all he wanted and then just mashed it into the plate. So the gentleman who had come in, just wanting to have lunch, got up, went and paid for his lunch and walked out. When the waitress came over to remove the dishes, one of the tough guys said, "Not much of a man, is he?" And the waitress says, yeah, you're probably right. He's not much a driver either. He just ran over your motorcycles out front. Now, I'm not advocating violence. What I'm saying is that there is always a need for Christian action after wrong has been done.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah. That's theological. And so I think that we have to act. I mean, it's not enough to just talk. I mean, we have to act. We have to do things. We have to become personally involved. I mean, we ought to be prophetic. We've got to call what it is. And this is wrong, and it is un-American, based on the founding fathers and their writings. This is not who we are. This is not what we are about. We're supposed to be the light on the hill. We're supposed to be the leader of the world. And here we are, referring to a federal judge, a United States district judge, as somebody who cannot make an objective decision because he is a Mexican. Now, the example I gave fell from the lips of the President of the United States of America. And every American should be chilled and infuriated, as with the prophets of old, when someone dares to mistreat a child of God. As men and women of faith, it is our responsibility to be a voice for those who've not been given the chance to become one themselves. Change does not come easily, and it never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Change is brought about primarily by good and decent people who wrap themselves around the love of Jesus and understand clearly that I have an obligation to the gospel to stand up and speak out and march or whatever I need to do to make sure that all of God's children are treated with decency. Now, you can sit down, have a good time. The only thing I'm asking you to do is when you leave this conference is to go home and be the voice, even if it's a voice crying in the wilderness for that which is right. And I want to close as you want me to. But the name Jesus still has power. And I think we just forget about the name. Over 100 different names for him. We don't have time for me to do all 100 of them. But 100 names. A little boy goes to the grocery store with his mother, and they come through the front door. And the mother says, Billy, let me tell you right now, we're not going to have it. You're not going to go up and down the aisles with me saying, you want this and you want that and you want that. And clearly, you're not going to get those chocolate chip cookies. Every time we come, you start that chocolate chip cookie litany. And this time, I'm telling you, before we get any further, you do that, and when we get home, I'm turning you over to your dad. So she said, yes, ma'am. So he sits down in the basket. And the mother shops, and he says nothing. He says nothing at all. He's just sitting there in the basket. And she's pleasantly pleased and surprised. And then as the basket fills, his mother goes up to the counter. The little boy realizes when he gets to the counter that all is lost. That he will leave this grocery store without the chocolate chip cookies. And so he then stands up in the basket and stretches out his arms. And he says, in the name of Jesus, will somebody bring me some chocolate chip cookies? And from all over the store, people are coming in with chocolate chip cookies and filling up the basket. I'm telling you, there's power in the name Jesus. There is mercy in the name Jesus. There is justice in the name of Jesus. There's hope in the name of Jesus.